Have you ever noticed that the more confused you become, the easier other people seem to control your emotions? At first, the confusion feels harmless, a strange conversation, mixed signals, an uncomfortable reaction you cannot fully explain. Nothing dramatic, nothing obvious. But slowly, something begins changing inside you. You stop trusting your own thoughts naturally, replay conversations afterward, question your reactions, wonder whether you misunderstood something simple. And over time, confusion slowly replaces certainty, because clarity protects emotional independence, but confusion weakens it psychologically. Another important realization begins forming when emotional contradiction becomes normal. One day, someone sounds emotionally supportive, warm, understanding, and the next, cold, dismissive, emotionally distant. An inconsistent emotional behavior creates instability faster than people realize, because the nervous system keeps searching for emotional safety that never fully arrives. Another subtle shift begins happening when you begin explaining yourself more than before, not naturally, defensively. You over-explain intentions, clarify harmless comments, carefully choose words before speaking, not because communication became healthier, because emotional unpredictability made honesty feel risky, and risky environments change personality quietly. Another meaningful realization begins appearing when confusion begins affecting confidence itself. You hesitate before speaking freely, before expressing disagreement, before trusting your instincts naturally. Not because intelligence disappeared, because repeated uncertainty weakened inner certainty. And once inner certainty weakens, outside opinions become emotionally powerful. Another important pattern begins forming when emotional exhaustion starts becoming constant. Not visible exhaustion, internal exhaustion, the kind created by constantly trying to understand emotional inconsistency. You analyze tone, replay reactions, search for hidden meaning inside simple interactions, and psychological overanalysis consumes emotional energy slowly, because confusion forces the brain to remain emotionally alert. Another powerful shift begins happening when your nervous system starts prioritizing emotional safety over emotional truth. You stay quiet to avoid tension, agree to avoid reaction, suppress discomfort to maintain temporary peace, not because silence feels honest, because emotional unpredictability made honesty feel emotionally expensive, and emotional suppression disconnects people from themselves over time. Another subtle realization begins forming when confusion starts changing your emotional identity. You become more cautious, more emotionally filtered, less spontaneous, not naturally, adaptively, because adaptation helps avoid emotional discomfort, and repeated adaptation slowly becomes personality. Another meaningful shift begins appearing when emotionally healthy people begin feeling different, calmer, clearer, emotionally safer, not because they are perfect, because emotionally healthy people do not constantly create confusion. Their communication feels emotionally stable. Their reactions feel predictable. Their emotional energy feels consistent. And consistency creates nervous system safety. Another important realization begins happening when you understand that emotionally confusing environments often create emotional dependence indirectly, not through force, through instability, because unstable emotional environments weaken self-trust, and weakened self-trust creates emotional vulnerability. You begin needing reassurance more often, validation more frequently, emotional confirmation more intensely, not because you became weak, because confusion weakened inner stability gradually. Another powerful pattern begins forming when emotional contradiction starts affecting memory itself. You remember situations clearly, then suddenly question yourself afterward. Wonder whether events happened differently, whether your emotions were justified, whether your discomfort was too sensitive. And repeated self-questioning weakens perception deeply. Because once people stop trusting perception, they become easier to influence emotionally. Another subtle shift begins happening when emotional tension starts controlling your behavior automatically. You monitor reactions before speaking, watch tone carefully, prepare emotionally before difficult conversations, not consciously, automatically, because your nervous system learned that emotional reactions may appear unpredictably, and unpredictability creates hyper-awareness. Another meaningful realization begins forming when emotional confusion starts reducing authenticity. You stop reacting honestly, stop expressing discomfort naturally, stop communicating freely, not because your personality disappeared, because emotional caution replaced emotional openness, and emotionally exhausting environments slowly shrink self-expression. Another important pattern begins appearing when confusion begins affecting decision-making itself. Simple choices become emotionally heavy. You overthink wording, second-guess plans, question instincts repeatedly, not because decisions became impossible, because confusion weakened trust in yourself. And once self-trust weakens, outside influence becomes stronger than inner clarity. Another powerful realization begins happening when you notice how emotionally controlling people often avoid direct clarity, not always intentionally, but psychologically, because clarity creates independence. Clarity creates emotional stability. Clarity strengthens self-trust. But confusion weakens all three, and weakened people become easier to emotionally influence. Another subtle realization begins forming when you stop trusting discomfort automatically. You feel emotional tension, then immediately dismiss it. Sense manipulation, then explain it away. Notice instability, then blame yourself for overthinking, and repeated self-dismissal weakens emotional confidence deeply. Because confidence is not only belief in ability, it is belief in perception. Another meaningful shift begins appearing when emotional exhaustion starts feeling normal. You become mentally tired faster, emotionally overwhelmed more easily. Simple interactions feel psychologically heavier than before, not because life became harder, because confusion forced your nervous system to remain emotionally alert constantly. And constant emotional alertness creates internal fatigue. Another important realization begins happening when clarity slowly starts returning again. You stop over-explaining yourself automatically. Stop chasing reassurance constantly. Stop abandoning your instincts to maintain emotional peace. And slowly, something important begins returning too. Your emotional ground, your inner certainty, your self-trust. Not dramatically, gradually. Another powerful shift begins forming when you understand that healthy communication does not leave you constantly confused. It does not make you question reality after every interaction. Does not make honesty feel emotionally dangerous. Healthy communication feels emotionally clear, stable, safe, even during disagreement. And that emotional difference changes perception completely. Another subtle realization begins appearing when you recognize that confusion was never your real personality. It was adaptation. Adaptation to emotional inconsistency. Adaptation to instability. Adaptation to repeated uncertainty. And adaptation changes people quietly. until one day, they stop sounding like themselves completely. Another meaningful realization begins forming when you finally reconnect with your own inner voice again. The voice that existed before confusion became constant, before emotional contradiction weakened certainty, before self-doubt became automatic. And once inner voice begins returning, clarity returns too, not instantly, steadily, quietly but powerfully. Another important shift begins happening when you stop asking, "What if I'm overreacting?" and start asking, "Why does this environment constantly make me doubt myself?" Because emotionally healthy environments do not repeatedly destroy clarity. They strengthen it. They strengthen emotional stability. They strengthen self-trust. And emotionally safe people do not benefit from your confusion. Another powerful realization begins forming when you finally understand that confused people become easier to control because confusion disconnects them from their own emotional truth. And once emotional truth weakens, outside influence grows louder. But awareness interrupts confusion. Awareness restores clarity, restores perception, restores self-trust. And once self-trust becomes stronger than emotional uncertainty, control begins losing its power, quietly, gradually, until one day, your thoughts stop feeling emotionally dangerous, your instincts stop feeling unreliable, and your mind finally feels emotionally safe again. Another disturbing realization begins forming when confusion starts affecting your emotional relationships with other people too. You stop trusting your interpretation of situations, wonder whether people are upset with you, whether you said something wrong. When emotional confusion changes the way you experience peace itself, silence no longer feels peaceful, it feels suspicious. Distance no longer feels neutral, it feels threatening, and calmness begins feeling temporary. Because part of your mind keeps expecting emotional instability to return. That is what prolonged confusion does psychologically. It trains the nervous system to expect uncertainty automatically. Another important realization begins happening when you recognize how emotionally confusing people often avoid direct answers. Simple questions become complicated conversations. Clear situations become emotionally blurred, and clarity never fully arrives because confusion survives best inside vagueness, inside emotional inconsistency, inside unanswered tension. And unanswered tension keeps people emotionally attached longer than certainty does. Another meaningful shift begins forming when you stop needing emotional chaos to feel emotionally connected, because emotionally exhausting dynamics often create intensity that people mistake for emotional depth. But emotional intensity is not always connection. Sometimes it is simply instability. And instability keeps the nervous system emotionally activated constantly. Another powerful realization begins appearing when your emotional clarity finally becomes stronger than your fear of reaction. You stop over-explaining yourself automatically. Stop apologizing for harmless emotions. Stop shrinking your instincts to avoid tension. And slowly, your mind begins feeling quieter again, calmer, safer, more emotionally grounded. Not because confusion disappeared instantly, because self-trust finally became stronger than uncertainty. And once self-trust returns, control begins disappearing naturally. Another meaningful realization begins forming when you finally understand that emotional clarity was never weakness. Your instincts were not the problem. Your discomfort was not irrational. Your nervous system noticed confusion long before your mind fully understood it. And that changes something important inside you. Because for the first time, you stop blaming yourself. for feeling emotionally unstable in emotionally unstable environments. Another powerful shift begins happening when you stop abandoning your own perception to protect someone else's emotional comfort. You stop ignoring tension. Stop dismissing repeated confusion. Stop convincing yourself that constant uncertainty is normal, and awareness changes emotional dynamics more than people realize. Because confused people become easier to control, only while they remain disconnected from themselves. But once self-trust returns, control weakens naturally, not dramatically, quietly, steadily, until one day, you stop overthinking every reaction, stop questioning every feeling, stop feeling emotionally lost inside your own mind, and your thoughts finally begin feeling clear again. Your emotions begin feeling safe again, and your inner voice finally sounds like your own again. And maybe the most important realization is this: confusion does not always feel like control at first. Sometimes it feels like misunderstanding, like maybe you missed something. Maybe you reacted too strongly. Maybe you asked the wrong question. Maybe you should have explained yourself better. Maybe the tension was only in your head. And that is exactly why confusion can become so powerful, because it does not always attack your mind directly. It slowly makes you question your mind. It makes you question what you heard, what you felt, what you noticed, what your body reacted to, what your instincts were trying to tell you. And eventually, you do not only become confused about the other person, you become confused about yourself. You start needing proof for emotions that should have been trusted. You start needing permission to feel uncomfortable. You start needing someone else to confirm what your nervous system already understood. And that is where emotional control becomes dangerous. Because once a person loses trust in their own perception, they become easier to lead, easier to silence, easier to redirect, easier to blame, easier to convince, easier to pull back into the same emotional pattern, not because they are weak, but because confusion has slowly disconnected them from their own inner certainty. And that is why clarity matters so much. Clarity is not cold. Clarity is not cruel. Clarity is not emotional distance. Clarity is protection. It protects your mind from endless doubt. It protects your heart from chasing unstable reassurance. It protects your peace from people who only feel powerful when you feel unsure. Because emotionally healthy people do not need to confuse you, to keep you close. They do not need to blur the truth. They do not need to make simple things complicated. They do not need to leave you guessing just to feel emotionally important. Healthy connection feels different. It may still have difficult conversations. It may still have disagreement. It may still have uncomfortable moments, but it does not repeatedly make you lose yourself. It does not make your thoughts feel unsafe. It does not make your instincts feel unreliable. It does not make your own emotions feel like evidence against you. And when you finally understand that, something inside you begins to change. You stop asking, "What is wrong with me?" And you start asking, "Why do I keep feeling confused around this person?" You stop blaming yourself for reacting to emotional instability. You stop treating your discomfort like a personal failure. You stop calling your intuition anxiety when it was actually trying to protect you. And slowly, your mind begins returning to you. Not all at once, quietly, gradually in small moments. The moment you stop over-explaining, the moment you stop apologizing for noticing patterns, the moment you stop chasing clarity from someone who keeps creating confusion, the moment you choose peace over another emotionally exhausting conversation. And with every small return to yourself, control loses a little more power. Because control needs confusion to survive. It needs you unsure. It needs you emotionally tired. It needs you questioning yourself more than you question the pattern. But when self-trust returns, confusion cannot hold you the same way anymore. You begin seeing what you used to excuse. You begin hearing what you used to ignore. You begin understanding that your peace was never supposed to depend on someone else's emotional unpredictability. And then, a deeper kind of freedom begins. Not loud freedom, not dramatic freedom, but the quiet freedom of finally believing yourself again. The freedom of not needing every feeling approved. The freedom of not explaining your discomfort to people committed to misunderstanding it. The freedom of not abandoning your reality just to keep someone else comfortable. And maybe that is the moment everything truly changes. Because a confused mind can be controlled. But a clear mind begins choosing differently. A clear mind no longer begs for honesty from people who benefit from hiding behind vagueness. A clear mind no longer mistakes emotional chaos for emotional connection. A clear mind no longer stays trapped inside situations that require self-betrayal to survive. And when your mind becomes clear again, your life begins to feel like your own again. Your thoughts feel safer. Your emotions feel more honest. Your instincts feel less frightening. Your silence feels peaceful again instead of suspicious. And one day, you realize something powerful. You were never too sensitive. You were responding to confusion before you had the words to explain it. You were never broken. You were adapting to an environment that kept making certainty feel impossible. And now, you do not need to stay adapted to something that kept disconnecting you from yourself. Because the moment you return to your own truth, the moment you trust what you feel, the moment you stop letting confusion explain away what you already know, you become much harder to control. And that is where real clarity begins.